Hi, my name is David. I will be guiding you through College Board's test number 7, no, let's go 397 for Math Module 1 and 2 today. All right, let's get hit into the first question. Question number 1. In question number 1, the scatter plot shows the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit and the distance above sea level in feet measured at 6 locations on Mount Jefferson. A line of best fit is also shown. So there's a good reminder about line of best fit. We have the dots, which are the actual data points, and then we have a line of best fit, which is our predictor, our predicted line or line of prediction. All right, at a distance of 4,000 feet above sea level, so looking at the x-axis, it says 4,000 feet right here. And what is the temperature predicted by the line of best fit? So you might be drawn by these data points, but we want the line of best fit prediction, which is going to be lining up with 35. And that's why the answer is B. Question number 2. Lorenzo purchased a box of cereal and some strawberries at the grocery store. Delicious. Lorenzo paid $2 for the box of cereal and $1.9 per pound for the strawberries. So that sounds like a rate, and the $2 sounds like another rate, but probably only buying one box of cereal, so it might look like an initial cost. If Lorenzo paid a total of $9.60 for the box of cereal and the strawberries, which of the following equations could be used to find P, the number of pounds of strawberries Lorenzo purchased? Assume there's no sales tax. Okay, so we know the rate is going to be 1.90, and that is per pound, so we're going to multiply those together. And then we're going to add the cost of the box of cereal, and that would equal the total amount of 9.60, which leads us to A as our answer. Question number 3. A line in the x-y plane has a slope of 9 and passes a point 0, -5. So we could make an equation of a line that would be using point slope form. And that'd be 9, x minus 0 plus -5. And the equation y equals ex plus r. So if we want to rewrite this, we could write this as y equals 9x minus 5. And that's supposed to match up with y equals ex plus r. And so r would match up with -5 and p would match up with 9. What is the value of p? Oh, well, it's right there. It turns out it's the slope in this case. So since p is equal to 9, we can then type in 9 and we're done. Question number 4. The graph shown gives the estimated value in dollars of a tablet as a function of the number of months since it was purchased. So we have x-axis number of months purchased and the value of it. It looks like it's decreasing potentially an exponential rate. What is the best interpretation of the y-intercept? So y-intercept means that the x variable is 0, and in this case, x is the number of months. So looking at my graph, we have 0 here, and then it goes up to there. So I can see that the value is 225 when we had 0 months. Let's look at the answer choices. A, the estimated value was 225 when it was purchased, so that sounds exactly right when time is 0. The estimated value of the tablet 24 months after it was purchased, 225. Well, 24 months is here, and that's 50, but that would not be when time was 0. That would be when time is 24. We can cross off B. The estimated value of the tablet has decreased by 225 in 24 months. Well, we can see that it decreased by maybe about 175. And again, that's not involving the y-intercept. So we can cross it off. The estimated value of the tablet decreased by approximately 2.25% each year it was purchased. And then again, that may be true. I think it's actually probably 2.25% each month it was purchased, but still, either way, it's not the y-intercept. So all of them are gone, and the answer was A. Question number 5. Triangles EFG and JKA are congruent. So that means they have the same angles and same corresponding sides. EFG corresponds to JKL. Okay. So we don't know what type of triangles are, so I'm going to draw some generic triangles. And they're going to be congruent. Now, these again look like equilateral triangles, but I like to do this when I'm doing a generic triangle. So I know for myself that this is not equilateral. So keep that in your mind. It does make it easier to write in the angles, so that's why it can be helpful to do it this way. So E is 45. And that they told us that E matches up with J, so then J is 45. The measure of angle F is 20, so that matches up with K, because they told us that F was K. And then we could do 180 minus 65 to get 115, and that would be the last angle here. All right, what is the measure of angle J? Well, that was actually something we calculated very early on. So we were done long, long time ago, but still, it's sometimes helpful to see how we can solve all parts of it instead of just going straight for the answer. See you in the next one. Question number 6. The graph of system of an absolute value function, so something that usually looks like a V shape, and linear function is shown. Okay, so because I know what absolute value functions look like, this is the absolute value function, and the other one is the straight line. What is the solution of xy to the system of two equations? So we could spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what are the actual functions and linear functions and then try to solve it. But when we have a graph provided, the solution to a system of equation is finding where the equations all overlap. So right here at, it looks like about negative 3.5, maybe 4.5 is where it is intersecting. So it's not 0, 8, which would be the y-intercept for the line. 3.5, 4.5 would be off the screen, so we can cross that off. This is negative 3.5, and 4.5 is exactly what we want. That's pretty good. And then negative 3, 4 is this point, the vertex of the absolute value function, which we can eliminate too. So again, it wouldn't have to be exactly negative 3.5 based on this graph. It could have been negative 3.4, negative 3.6. So again, using your best estimation. All right, see you in the next one. Question number 7. One of the two equations is in a system of linear equations is given. So we have that right above. The system has infinitely many solutions. All right, so that means that the second line must be the same line as that one. It might not look exactly the same. Like for example, it could be 2y is equal to 12x plus 6 because we multiply everything by 2. If you're graphing this on Desmos, you want to make sure that it has the same slope as well as the same x and y intercepts, which means that it actually is going to be the exact same line. All right, let's get to it. So for A does have a slope of 12, but it didn't change any other numbers. So that would not be the same line. This one, it doubled the right-hand side, but they forgot to double the left-hand side. This one, they doubled the slope and they doubled the left-hand side, but they forgot the 3. So we can cross that off. And then this one, they doubled both sides, which is just conveniently what I did here. But yeah, it could have been any multiple. So you could have multiplied by 3 on both sides or multiplied by 1/3. Any of those would have worked. Question number 8. 6 over 7p plus 18 is equal to 54. What is the value of 7p? All right, so you can use a graphing calculator for this, but we can do it pretty quickly by hand too. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract the 18 over both sides. So we get 6 over 7p is equal to 42. And then, I'm sorry, I have to redo that one. Question number 8. If 6/7 of p plus 18 is equal to 54, what's the value of 7p? Well, we can just on our calculator on Desmos, but we can also do it pretty quickly by hand. So we subtract 18 from both sides, and that gives us 36. So 6 over 7p is equal to 36. Next, we want to get p by itself, so I'll multiply both sides by the reciprocal. And then that gives us p is equal to 36 divided by 6 is 6. 6 times 7 is 42. Now, this is where assumptions stop a little bit early. The question was not is what's the value of p, but what's the value of 7p. So then we want to take the 7 and times the take the p and times it by 7 and take the 42 times it by 7. And then we get 294. So that is the final answer. So if you stopped at 42, definitely make sure you're always answering the question, not just solving for a variable. And then lastly, if you had trouble getting to p, review your rules for PEMDAS, an order of operations. The solution to the given system of equations is x and y, which is normally what solutions to a system are. What is the value of y? So we're looking for the y variable. So that kind of tells me I want to get rid of the x variables. So although you could substitute the 9x plus 12 in for the y here, that would give you x value. So instead, it might be worthwhile to try to get rid of the x. So I could see by subtracting 7y to the other side, I would quickly get x by itself. And so I'm going to use substitution. Y is equal to 9 times 20 minus 7y plus 12. And then we do some cleanup. 180 minus 63y plus 12. And then we're going to move the y's to the y side. So 64y is equal to 192. We divide both sides by 64. And then you can use a calculator if you want to, but I can see that's going to be 3. All right, now if instead you had solved for the x first, you would have gone x is equal to -1, and then you could have plugged that in to the top equation, and then got y equals 9 times -1 plus 12, which would also give you 3. But that would have taken you a little bit more time if you're solving it by hand. If you graph them both on Desmos, though, the point of intersection will give you both the x and the y value. So just make sure to pick the one that they're asked for and don't accidentally pick the x. Question number 10. A circle in the xy plane has the equation of blank. Well, that is a good reminder that that is related to the equation of a circle, which is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where the center is h comma k and the radius is and this value r squared is the number there, so the radius is you have to square root the r squared. All right, what is the center? Oh, well, that's pretty easy. So we look at it, and again, it's tempting to write the numbers you see, but you always have to remember it's already x minus h, so you have to do the opposite sign. So the center is going to be 13 comma positive k, and then the radius is not 64 or 32, but you have to square root the 64. All right, let's see which ones have that. So this looks pretty good. This is incorrect, incorrect. This looks pretty good. And then this one, we don't want the radius of 64. We want the radius to be 8. That's why the answer was A. The equation of the circle is very frequent on the test. So if you are unfamiliar with it, definitely keep track of it and write the formula down and work on keeping track of the center and the radius. Question number 11. The function f is defined by the absolute value function f of x is equal to absolute value of x minus 4x. By the way, I don't know why they wrote it that way because it looks like it could be a typo, but x minus 4x is just -3x. So let's clean that up a little bit. This is just the SAT trying to get into your head. Now, something to remember though, the absolute value of -3x is not the same as absolute value of 3 times it. So we'll get to that in a moment. What value of a satisfies f of 5 minus f of a equals -15? So essentially what we're trying to find is that we are trying to find that f of 5 minus -15, so plus 15, is equal to f of a. So what I did is I got the variable by itself by adding it to the right-hand side and then adding 15 to both sides. Why would that be helpful? Well, by getting the variable by itself, it makes the left side or the right side just be numbers, which is usually easier to work with. Let's go through it. F of 5. Well, f of 5 means I plug in or substitute 5 in for x. And so this is going to be the absolute value of -15, which is going to be just regular 15. So then we get f of a is equal to 30. Now we could then solve it algebraically, or we could use substitution. So for example, for a, if I plug in -20, I would get 60, which is not 30. If I plugged in 5, I would get 15, which we already know because we did that earlier. If I plugged in f of 10, I would get absolute value of -30, which is 30, which is what we want. And I did f of 45, we would get 135, which is not what we want. So by using the values provided, we can solve it. Okay. Key thing in solving these type of problems is to make it simpler than what they give you, and also don't let them get inside your head. By having it separate, you might have thought it was like x minus 4, and then you were using those numbers to try to solve the problem, and that could have made you go astray. All right, see you in the next one. Question number 12. For the exponential function f, the value of f of 0 is c. So this is one of our first of the letters or the constants problems. So they can be tricky at first, but just remember the letters are just a placeholder for a number. So they're not telling you up front, but again, by working through it and persevering with your math skills, you will solve it. And also very quickly too. So where c is a constant, which of the following equation defines the function f, which equation shows the value of c as the coefficient or the base. So it might think you don't know what to do, but really, they're telling us what to do. Plug in f of 0. So if I plug in f of 0 for a, I would get 22 times 1.5 to the 1. Now, is that right here the base? Well, no, the base is 1.5. Is it the coefficient? Well, no, the coefficient is 22. So we know it's not a. Well, let's try the next one. All right, f of 0 is 33 times 1.5 to the 0, which is 33. Hey, that is the coefficient. It's right there. Now we could check the next one and the next one, and you can see that that would have a -1 and -2, and that would still not be the base or the coefficient. So definitely it wasn't that bad. But keep an eye on it. They tell you information like they say plug in f of 1 or plug in f of 2. Just do that. Don't make it harder than it really is. Question number 13. The function f of t, oh, it's a little typo, f of t, and equal to 40,000 times 2 to the t over 7,900 gives the number of bacteria in the population t minutes after initial observation. How much time in minutes does it take for the number of bacteria to double? Okay, well, what we can do is plug in points. So f of 0, as we just saw, is going to be the coefficient, or 40,000. In order to double, that means it goes from 40,000 to 80,000. So let's plug in 80,000 and solve for t. 80,000 is equal to 40,000 to the t over 790. All right, now we have to follow our order of operations. First, divide by 40,000, and what you get is 2 is equal to 2 to the t over 790. And so here you might notice the trick for a future problem is that you didn't actually need to know what the initial and the final numbers are. Because of doubling it, we could have just have what we're multiplying by is equal to the base raised to the power. All right, from here, we play the matching game. So 2 by itself is the same as 2 to the 1. And since the right side has a base of 2, we just set the exponents equal to each other. And then t is equal to 790, which is b. And so that's actually another good thing going forward is that actually it's called the growth formula or the doubling formula where the 790 is actually how many time has passed for the base to go through, which kind of makes sense, right? Like if you have a table of values, we have 0, 1, not 1, but 790, 1580, etc., then it would be 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, 2 to the 2. So it's kind of how many times it's going to that, multiplying by that base. So, all right, see you in the next one. Question number 14. Given the equation above, 12 over n minus 2 over t is equal to negative 2 over w, and t and w are here variables, so they're not constants. N is positive, t is positive, w is more than t, okay? Which expression is equivalent to n? So what I'm going to focus on is my solving for a variable. So generally speaking, I'm going to try to isolate the variable since there is an addition or subtraction occurring next to the n. I'm going to move it over to the other side. So 12 over n is equal to 2 over t minus 2 over w. Next, before I do anything with the n, I'm going to make sure to combine the fractions on the right-hand side using lowest common denominator. So it's going to be 12 over n is equal to 2w minus 2t all over tw. And so now at this point, we can then solve for n by either using the reciprocal rule for fractions. When you have one fraction to equal another fraction, you can just flip both sides, or you could raise both sides to the -1 power. So n over 12 is equal to tw over 2w minus 2t. And then our last step is to multiply both sides by 12. So what I'm looking for is basically tw on top and then w minus t on the bottom. All right, so this one does not have fraction. So this has w minus t on top and tw on the bottom, so it looks like the opposite of what I want. And then this one says 6tw over w minus t. Why is that? Well, basically you could factor out a 2 on the top, and you could factor out 2 on the bottom, and then those 2's cancel. So then you could get D as the answer. So something to keep in mind. Okay, a little trickier. So definitely, but I hope that made more sense of that question. Question number 15. During a study, the temperature in degrees Celsius of the air in a chamber was recorded to the nearest integer at certain times. The scatter plot shows record temperature in degrees Celsius in the air chamber X minutes after the start of the study. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. We see that 0. We have a bunch of numbers here. All right. What was the average rate change in degrees Celsius per minute of the recorded temperature of the air in the chamber from 5 to 7? Okay, so the question is not what's the line of best fit or anything like that. It's just what is the change in temperature from 5 to 7. So I'm going to go to the 5, which is 5 comma 14, and to 7, which is 7 comma 24. All right, and then average rate change is code for slope. So we wanted to find the change in temperature over the change in time. So 24 minus 14 over 7 minus 5 will be 10 degrees Celsius over 2 minutes, which simplifies down to 5. And 5 is the right answer. So definitely this question seems a little bit weirder. There has some vocab in here that you might not be familiar with. A good reminder is rate of change is going to be represented by slope. And then also a good idea, you can always look at the units to help you guide you for the answers too. All right, see you in the next one. Question number 16. In August, a car dealer completed 15 more than 3 times the number of sales the dealer completed in September. So just hypothetically, number of deals in August would be 15 more than 3 times the sales in September. In August and September, the car dealer completed 363 sales. So August plus September is equal to 363 sales. How many sales did the car dealer complete in September? Okay, so this time I want to get rid of the A variable. So I'm going to substitute 15 plus 3s into the bottom equation. So 15 plus 3 times s plus s is equal to 363. Combine the s's, then also combine like terms. So we get 4s is equal to 363 minus 15, which is going to be 348. Yeah, that makes more sense. And then we divide both sides by 4. All right, and then s should equal 87. All right, so that is the correct answer. But if you had solved for the amount of sales in August, August was 276, and then you would have to plug it back in to find for s, and then s is still 87. Once again, you could have graphed both of these on decimals. You might not have been able to use a and s. Instead, you might have had to use like y is equal to 15 plus 3x, and then y plus x is equal to 363. You then have to then scroll up to where the x value is 87. So something to keep in mind. But yeah, definitely a very good problem to use on decimals as well. Question number 17. Points Q and R lie in a circle with center P. So we know the center is P. The radius of the circle is 9 inches. Okay, so if we draw a line from the center to the edge, that's 9. Triangle PQR has a perimeter of 31 inches. What is the length of QR? So this is like tricky because we don't know what the triangle or the circle looks like. But I'm just gonna draw another point here, I guess. And Q and R lie in the circle. So I'm gonna say this is Q and this is R. That's another radius, so that's another 9. And then we don't know this distance here, but that is what we're solving for. All right. But if we add up all the sides of a triangle, that's known as the perimeter. So 31 would equal 9 plus 9 plus x. And then from here, we subtract 18 from both sides, and we get 13 is equal to x, which is our answer here. So let's look at the other answer choices. D would suggest it's an equilateral triangle, which we did not know that in the problem. It didn't mention that there's a 60-degree angle or the proportion of the circle. So then 9 or 2 would be specifically if it's an isosceles right triangle. So if we knew that this angle was 90, then we could do the isosceles right triangle, but then we wouldn't need to know the perimeter is 31. So definitely an interesting question. So I hope that made more sense. Again, it was very abstract and very weird, but one of the key things for solving these geometry problems, if you do not see a picture, draw a picture on your scratch paper. That will help you make more sense of it. Question 18. In the set of 4 consecutive odd integers. So again, that could be like 1, 3, 5, 7. However, that could also be like -11, -9, and so forth. So let's keep reading. Where the integers are from least to greatest, the first integers represent x. Okay, so that's using variables as placeholders. And that's a good thing to learn in general. So in the future, if they don't tell you what the numbers are, you probably want to assume that it's just x is the first one. And with both consecutive odd integers and consecutive even integers, they both go up by 2. And that makes sense because 1 to 3 to 5, that's a difference of 2 each time. And if you had a different thing instead, like if the consecutive multiples of 5, then you'd be going up by 5 each time. So, but even and odd are very common because they don't have to tell you the number and you have to know that it goes up by 2. All right, so I have 4 consecutive odd numbers. So x, x plus 2, x plus 4, and x plus 6. X is the least, x plus 6 is the greatest. The product of 12 and the fourth odd integer is at most. So let's write, again, there's a lot of words there. The product, which means multiplication. So 12 times x plus 6, which is the fourth term, is at most. So that means it is less than or equal to 26 less than the sum. So that's tricky wording though. So 26 less than is not 26 minus the sum. It's actually the sum minus 26. So the first and the third, so it's going to be x plus x plus 4. I'm going to put that in parentheses just because it's the sum of that, and then minus the 26. All right, and now we have to go through each of them and make sure we pick the right one. But take your time because they probably have small things like switching the inequality signs or moving the terms around. So 12 times x plus 6 is less than, that's pretty good. 12 x plus 6 is greater than, that's probably not correct because the sign changed. And that says x plus 4, x plus 4. So that is the third term, not the fourth term. Let's make sure, though, that A is completely right. So then we have x and x plus 4. So it's x and x plus 4. And then we have the minus 26 at the end. Perfect. All right, so A has everything right there, which means we're done. And we can go on to the next question. Question number 19. The table above shows 3 values of x and the corresponding values of y, where s is a constant, so another placeholder. There's a linear relationship here. So we know it must be linear, so we don't have to worry about doing quadratic regression or anything like that. Which line could represent that? So the first thing I do is I'm going to find the slope. So one thing I noticed is that the y value goes up by 3 every single time the x value goes up by s. So that tells me the slope is going to be 3 over s. Since I have points on a graph, I'm going to use point slope form. So y is equal to 3 over s, and then I'm going to pick the bottom point since it looks the easiest. All right, now let's multiply this out. So we get y is equal to 3 over sx, and then 3 over s times negative s is going to be -3, and then we have plus 15. That looks pretty good. And then adding s. Oh, sorry. I misread that. The slope is -3. So -3, -3. That's a +3, -3. There you go. So now that makes sense because there's supposed to be 18s. So that's a good, easy way to catch that. So -3 over s, x plus 18. Okay, so how do we get this to look like that? So this is called standard form. So we need to add the x to the side and then multiply everything by the denominator. So move it on over. So we have 3 over sx plus y is equal to 18. And we multiply everything by s. So you get 3x plus sy is equal to 18s. So B looks pretty good. And what do you know? B was the correct answer. So definitely there's a letter in there, and that can make it seem trickier. But you could just type this into Desmos and then just make a placeholder for the S value. And then you could just graph A, graph B, graph C, graph D, and which one hits the 4 points is your answer. So if you want to take a look at what that might be, I did some work here. And so I typed in the points there. I also added the y-intercept because I could see that it was going down by 3. So if you go from negative s to add another s, that becomes 0. And we can see that these lines all kind of hit those 4 dots. So there's different ways of doing it. You can do residual plots, set up the x's and the y's here. And then as a good reminder that if we make this be an s here and an s here, this is a point slope form. So we can close those off for now. And then it doesn't matter what s values are. Like, yes, the points in the table will change and the equation will change, but it'll all change together. So, yeah, pretty cool. Again, if you have any other questions about Desmos, definitely reach out to your teacher and we'll be happy to help you out. All right, see you in the next one. Question number 20. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to blah? Well, that might seem pretty tricky, but that is just the angle addition function for sine. So this is just asking you what is the sine of 24 plus 66, which is the sine of 90 or 1. But like you have a calculator, you have Desmos, you can just plug each of these into Desmos and solve it very, very quickly. So for example, here's the first number, which we got 1, as we expected. I typed in 2 cosine 66, sine 24, I got 0.33. Did 2 cos 66, 2 cos 24, which is 2.64. Cos 66, cosine 24 squared, which is 1. And that is the answer. One thing that if you did use Desmos and it didn't work out for you, you probably forgot to switch between the radian mode and the degree mode. So in this case, if you were in radian mode, none of the answers are making sense. And that's, you might be like pulling your hair out trying to figure out what's went wrong. So make sure when you're using degrees on Desmos, it's in degree mode. But your scientific calculator, graph calculator as well. Yeah, perfect. See you in the next. Question 21. The cost of renting a carpet cleaner is $52 for the first day and 26 for each additional day. Which of the following function gives the cost D in dollars of renting the carpet cleaner for D days when D is a positive integer? Okay, so if we are kind of making a model, this is the number of days and this is the cost. The first day, it's $52. But if we do a second day, then it's going to be 52 plus 26. So looking at the models, you may be tempted to pick B right away because it has the y-intercept, the starting amount of 52, and it has the rate of 26. Unfortunately, that's going to lead you astray because if we plug in B is 1, you would actually have the cost be $78, not 52. So the actual correct answer is going up 1. So this one doesn't look originally correct, but try plugging some of the days in. If we plug in 1, we get 52. We plug in 2, we get 78, which is exactly what we want. Well, what about the third one, that here? For the third one, you do get the right number for when, like if D was like 0, maybe? No, actually, that's kidding. It doesn't work either way. I was hoping like maybe it was like 26 minus it. But we would have to have it be a different setup completely. So yeah, it just feels right. It seems like correct, but again, just remember whenever it's a rate, 26 per day, it should be the number times the variable. So again, can't be C or D. And then the answer is A. Question 22. The function f is defined by the given equation. For what value of x does fx reach its minimum? Well, this is a quadratic. I can see that because there's two factored linear terms. And we can graph this pretty quickly. There's a 0 at 2 and a 0 at negative 15. It's the quadratic is positive because there's no negative multiplying the terms in front. So it's going to go down, 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 and then come back up around. And then we want to find the x value of its minimum. So that's going to be right down the middle. So we can take negative 15 plus 2 divided by 2, which will give us negative 13 over 2, which, by the way, you can just type in into the grid in right here, which is correct. You don't have to write a decimal. However, another thing you could do instead is you could graph it. So let's say, for example, we wanted to graph it on Desmos. So f of x is equal to x minus 2, x plus 15. And you might have to zoom out a bit, but what we can see is we have the 0 here at 2 and at negative 15, as we saw earlier. And if we scroll down, 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 Desmos does tell us the x value as well as the y value. And always make sure to double check. But this question asks for what is the x value of the vertex. So that's how we know for sure it's negative 13 over 2. All right, that does it for module 1. I'll see you in the next one. Question 1. F of x is equal to 45x plus 600. The function f gives the monthly fee in dollars of facility charges to keep X crates in the storage. What is the monthly fee in the facility charges to keep 50 crates? So we want to plug in 50 for X. So f of 50 is equal to 45 times 50 plus 600. So we can grab our calculator, and after plugging into your calculator, you should get 2,850. And we type it in, and we are done. So on to question 2. Question 2. Function f is defined by the f of x equals 5 parentheses 1/4 minus x squared plus 11/4. What is value of f of 1/4? So for this question, we're going to plug in 1/4 in for x. We get 5 of 1/4 minus 1/4 squared plus 11/4. And from here, you get 5 times 0 squared plus 11/4, which is going to equal 11/4. And you can make it into a decimal, but we have it as a fraction, so just write it in as a fraction. All right, on to question 3. Question 3. If 8x is equal to 6, so 8x is equal to 6, what is value of 72x? So now you could divide both sides by 8 and get x equals 6/8 and plug it in for 72, but if you multiply both sides by 9, you get 72x is equal to 54. And that's what we're looking for. So definitely a faster option is to multiply both sides by 9, but that's something you have to be thinking about. On to question 4. Question 4. Which expression is equivalent to that? So what we're going to be doing is playing the matching game. So I notice this is x cubed and this linear term at the end, and these are all factored out. So I could try factoring out from here. I can also just try multiplying them out. Both of those are effective strategies. For me, though, I see that they all have an x. So I'm going to take an x out, and that leaves me with 23x squared plus 2x plus 9. All right, so this one has an x out in front by itself, 23x squared plus 2x plus 9. So that does work. So we're going to pick that as our answer. On to question 5. This is another equivalent expression. So again, what I might want to do is combine the like terms first. So 9x cubed plus 6x cubed is 15x cubed. And then you might be tempted to add the 5x to the 5x squared, but you can't add terms of different degrees. So instead, we're going to write 5x squared by itself and 5x by itself. And then lastly, the 7 and the -5 are constant terms, so we can add those together, and that gives me +2. So this says x is 6, which would be imagine if you multiplied. That's x third, that's x to the 6, that's x third. This is probably if you added the 5x squared to 5x, and you just got click on the 10x squared. So that has everything exactly right. The answer was D. On to question 6. Question 6. At a state fair, the attendees can win tokens that are worth a different number of points depending on the shape. One attendee wins S square tokens and C circle tokens with a total value of 1,120 points. The equation 80S plus 90C is equal to 1,120. How many more points is a circle worth than a square token? So from here, I know that this is the point equation. So if there's S square tokens, then there must be 80 points per S token based on the equation. And then for circle, it's 90 per circle token. And the question is, how many more points is the circle token worth in the square? So 90 minus 80 would give us 10. The answer is D. On to question 7. In a given scatter plot, a line of estimate for the data is shown. Which line is closest to the slope of this data point? Well, I see 1 point pretty obvious right there. That looks pretty good. And is there another point that you see pretty easily? Well, not that one's pretty close, so we could probably estimate that. We could also estimate that one. But that definitely point, the 3,7 is pretty powerful. Now, what is the answer? Well, we can go through the answer choices. Oh, the slope of 0 is a horizontal line, so we can cross that off immediately. And is the slope of 1/2, 1, or 2? Well, we can try eyeballing it by drawing a slope triangle. So if I go over 1 in the x, how much should I go up by? Well, we know that's 7, and it came from approximately 5, so the slope should be 2. That'd be my guess. However, how can we use Desmos to do this for us? So I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to load up Desmos. So if you type in the word table, and then you do the values on the line that best fit, not the scatter point line, just the line that was fit. So we said we had 3,7, 3 times 7. All right, and then another point, I'm just going to pretend it's 2.51. So 2 times 0.51. And if you want to do another point, you could, but I'll maybe say 4, 9, 8.9. So, but what we're going to do after that is we're going to do a regression line using Desmos. So because it says y1 up here, we're going to type the letter y and 1. So you don't have to do anything special, just type y and 1. Then you do the tilde, and then we can do whatever slope form you like. mx plus b, ax plus b. So I'm going to do ax1, that way it matches that x1 plus b. And what we can see here is that a, which is the slope in this case, is 1.9, so which is the closest. The answer would be 2. So again, the slope triangle is definitely pretty effective, but you have Desmos available. So if this question was more challenging for you, the numbers were worse or something like that, you could use Desmos instead. All right, let's see you in the next one. Question 8. A circle has radius of 2.1 inches. The area of a circle is b pi squared inches. Well, the area of a circle is normally pi r squared. And so they're telling us that that is equal to b pi, and they also told us that the radius was 2.1. So let's think about putting this together. We have pi times 2.1 squared is equal to b pi. B is a constant, so that looks good. What's the value for b? Well, let's just solve for b. Divide both sides by pi, and you get b is equal to 2.1 squared. Well, we type that into our Desmos calculator or our scientific or graphing calculator, and we get b is equal to 4.41. And we want to type in all those characters. We don't want to round it prematurely because the question tells us to round to the 10th place or the 1st place. So type in all the number as you see. All right, let's go on to the next question. Number 9. In triangle XYZ, angle Y is a right angle. So I'm going to draw a triangle, and I want to call this Y, and that's the right angle. want to make it look like more like a Y. There we go. That's the right angle. Point P lies on XZ. So I don't know where X or Z is, so I'm just going to say X is on top, Z on the bottom, and P is somewhere on XZ. Point Q lies on YZ. Okay, so Q is on YZ, and PQ is parallel to XY. I don't know. So again, that was just convenience or just luck, but we do want them to be parallel, so they should be above each other. All right, so that looked like a classic similar triangle problem. So we have congruent angles on the top. They both share this angle. So let's keep going. If the measure of angle XZY, so XZY is the bottom right angle, so that is 63 degrees. What is the measure of the angle of XPQ? So that is this angle here. So what can we do? Well, we know that the Y is 90. So Z plus Y plus X is equal to 180. And Z is 63, Y is 90. So then what does X have to be? If you said 27, you are correct. But we were not solving for X. We were solving for angle XPQ. But the cool thing about similar triangles is that this top angle matches this angle. And so then angle XPQ plus angle ZBQ is equal to 180 because they make a linear pair. We just talked about how this is 27 because it matches the angle X. So then we can find out what XPQ is. Subtract 27 from both sides, and XPQ is equal to 153. And there you have it. There's definitely more ways of solving this type of problem. You could have instead used the angles of a quadrilateral. So the two base angles are 90, and that's 27. So 360 minus 90 minus 90 minus 27 would also give you 153 as well. So, a couple ways of thinking about it. Let's go on to the next question. Question 10. An investment account was opened with an initial value of $890. The value of the account doubled every 10 years. Okay, so what we imagine it should look like is some Y is equal to some initial amount, and it's doubling, so a base of 2, and it's doubling every 10 years, so T over 10 is what we should look for. As a good reminder, you could do a table of values where T and Y, and if there's 0 years, you'd have the starting amount, and then after 10 years, you'd have it doubled 1 time. So 890 times 2. All right, which equation represents this? T years after the account was opened. All right, so that's halving it. So we can cross that one off. That is doing 10% of it. That is doubling and has the right exponent. And then that they flip the numbers around, and that would be raising it by the power of 10 each time you did every 2 years. So we can cross it off. And so C was the correct answer. Question 11. We have Y is less than X and X is less than 22, which will find table of values of X corresponds to the given system of inequalities. So definitely you can graph this system of inequalities on Desmos, and that might make it easier for you to see it. You can also plug in the values and check it too. So for example, I know X has to be less than 22. So then all of these numbers here are less than 22. Let's see if that's the same for all the answer choices. So A looks good. B looks good. C, they did too big of values. So let's cross off C and D. And now we wanted to, when is the Y less than X? So 18 is less than 19, 19 is less than 20, 20 is less than 21. That's pretty good. For B, 20 is more than 19, it's more than 20, it's more than 22, 21. So B, they flipped the sign on you. They tried to do values greater than, not less than. So that's why A was the correct answer for question 1. Question 12. Which expression is equivalent to h to the 15 q7 divided by h to the 5th q21, where h is greater than 0 and q is greater than 0? So again, the greater than 0 here is important because if you had h is equal to 0, you'd be dividing by 0, which would cause a problem. But this problem is basically using your exponent rules. So when we have the same base divided, we subtract the exponent. So we want h to the 15 minus 5. And then the q, I'm going to multiply here, Q is gonna be 7 minus 21. So that gives me h to the 10 times q to the negative 14. Okay, I have an h to the 10, and this q is on the bottom. So that looks okay, but let's keep checking. This is h to the power of 3, not to the power of 10. This is h to the positive 10 and q to the positive 14, so we want negative 14, so that's incorrect. And then that has h3q3, that's incorrect. So what does that tell us? Well, that means when q is raised to a negative power, it goes into the denominator, or goes to the opposite side of the division bar. And so that's why the answer was A. All right, question 13. We should be getting questions that are a little more challenging or complex. The solution to the given system of equations, x, y. What is the value of 39x? So we're not solving for normal x, we're solving for something different. So this is system of linear equations. So we could graph some decimals, find x and y, and then times it by 39, which is definitely pretty quick. However, the SAT likes to have tricks along the way to make it go even faster. So 3y minus 3y gives you 0y. 9 plus 4 is 13x. And negative 23 plus 17 is negative 6. So that means we have 13x is equal to 6. And they conveniently picked 39x. So if we multiply both sides by 3, we get 39x is equal to 18. Which is why D is the correct answer. Well, let's make sure that decimals would have worked. And you can time me to see which one is faster. So here's our calculator. You can delete the stuff from before or just turn it off. All right, so we had 3y equals 4x plus 17. And we had negative 3y is equal to 9x minus 23. So that's our point of intersection. So we're going to copy that over. And then we want to do 39 times 0.46154, which is 18.0006. So definitely that worked pretty quickly. If this had been a graded problem, you might have got stuck, but again, you can only put 5 characters, so then you'd round to 18.00, which would have been correct here. Right. Let's go to the next one. Question 14. h of t is equal to negative 16 squared plus p. The function 8 estimates the object's height in feet above the ground t seconds after the object is dropped. B is a constant. Function estimates the object is 3,364 feet above the ground when it's dropped. T is equal to 0. Approximately how many seconds after being dropped does the function estimate the ground will hit the ground? Will the object hit the ground? So when the object hits the ground, they're telling you a value for h, and that is that the h is going to be 0 because we're measuring the height from the ground. So once you know that trick, it's pretty quick. So we know that that the height is going to be 0, then negative 16 squared plus b, and we're trying to solve for t. So that is what we need to do. Well, you might feel like you're stuck because you don't know the b value. So did they give us any more information in this problem? Yes. They said that the object was at 3,364 feet when it was dropped at t0. So that is a point 0, 3364. So we can plug that point in first to solve for the b value. So 3364 is equal to the height, negative 16 times 0 squared plus b. And b is the value of 3364. Now you might have looked at that and think, wait a minute, b is the y-intercept of this parabola, and that is the initial value of a lot of problems. So that's another shortcut you could have done instead of plugging the point in. Now that we have the b value, we plug it in and solve for t. So we have negative 16 squared plus 3364 is equal to 0. So subtract the 3364 over and divide by negative 16. So t squared is equal to negative 3364 over negative 16. And then we're going to square root it. And you plug that into your calculator, you get t is approximately 14.50, which is B. Question 15. 2x squared minus 8x minus 7 is equal to 0. But they gave us some interesting information. This is one solution can be written as 8 minus root k over 4. That's interesting. Why would they do that? Also, that might look familiar to you. If you recall the quadratic formula, where x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant over 2a over 2a, that kind of looks like it. And that is the trick. So basically, what we're looking to do here is use the quadratic formula normally, but then play the matching game with the 8 minus root k over 4. So let's get started. So the a is equal to 2, the b is equal to negative 8, and the c is equal to negative 7. So negative 8 is positive 8 plus or minus square root of 8 squared. So that's 64 minus 4 times 2 times negative 7 is all over 2 times a, which is 4, and then also 2 times a, which is 4. So let's play the matching game. We have 8 minus k over 4, and that's supposed to match up with 8 plus or minus. So we want the minus 1 to keep it consistent. And then we have 64, that's 8 times 7, which is 56. And then that is also all over 4. So we don't have to worry about doing any special simplifying of the radical inside and having a different denominator. But I have done that in the past. So that's why I have it kind of separated. So I remind myself to check the bottom as well. All right, so then we can focus on that k is the square root of k is equal to the square root of what, 120? And 120 is the correct answer. Question 16. A line intersects two parallel lines forming four acute angles. So again, we have two parallel lines, and then we get an acute angle here and an obtuse angle here. So, all right. The measure of one of the acute angles is 9x minus 560. That's interesting because we don't know what x is. So the acute is going to be 9x minus 560. And the sum of the measures of one of the acute and three of the obtuse angles. So one of the acute plus three of the obtuse is equal to negative 18x plus w, which we don't know what w is either. So that's definitely a really weird question. And we're then solving for w. Okay, so we have currently 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. So this is not something that we can solve right away. But one thing you might want to remember is that a plus o, the acute plus the obtuse angle, must add up to 180. And that's going to be critical to solving this problem. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go through this process. I know I have to get rid of the obtuse and the acute because I want to get things down to w. So if I look at this and I say, all right, let's multiply both sides by 3. We get 3a plus 3 times the obtuse angle is equal to 540. Okay, so that means that 3 times the obtuse angle is going to be 540 minus 3a. So let's substitute that into the equation above. So then we have 1a plus 540 minus 3a is equal to negative 18x plus w. Also, we're solving for w, so I might want to move the 18x to the other side. So let's try that next. So the 1a minus 3a is negative 2a. We're left with 540 minus 2a is plus 18x is equal to w. Okay, now it's still not solvable, but they told us something very weird. They told us another equation, and so just like with how we got rid of the obtuse angle, we're now getting rid of the acute angle by timesing it by 2. And so then we're going to get 540 minus 2 parens 9x minus 560 plus 18x is equal to w. And now we see something beautiful happen. The 18x here and the 18x here will cancel. So that's very important. So now we can just finish up the problem. 540 minus 2 times negative 560, which adds up to a grand total of 1,660 is the correct answer. So definitely a really weird question, but notice how it's notice number 16. So definitely would want to go ahead and move past this question if you got stuck on it. Okay, so for this problem right here with the fractions here, they're trying to mess with you. What I would do is quickly go to Desmos and just type in the word table. And then -4, 0, -19 divided by 5, 1, and then -18 divided by 5, 2, perfect. And then they said that the new function h is going to be f of x minus 13. So what we're going to do is just write y1 minus 13 here. And so that just updates numbers for us. Cool, cool. All right. So then what is the equation of h? So we can do a regression for that because it's a linear model. I think I need to write that y2 is equal to that, but doesn't quite work. All right, so y1 tilde ax1 plus b, that will give us the original f of x equation. And then we are subtracting 13 from it. So then the new model should be minusing 13. And so looking at that, we would have to pick the one that has a slope of 5. Yep, they all have 5. And then instead of having 20, we want to do 20 minus 13. So that would be 7 here. Right. So hopefully you found that helpful. But yeah, when they have weird fractions like that, you may want to go to Desmos and use the linear regression to help you out. Question 18. The linear function g of x is defined by b minus 15x, where b is a constant, and also is the y-intercept. And then we did a function transformation. G of c7 is c over 4, where c is a constant. Which of the following expressions represents the value for b? So for function notation, we're going to take this inside and put it in for every x. Because we replace that x, we replace that x. So that tells me that c over 4, the g value, is going to be b minus 15 times c plus 7. All right, now we just solve for in terms of c. So c over 4 plus 15c plus 105 is equal to b. And then we're going to start matching up that answer. So that has a 105, that has 105, and it's 15c plus a little bit, so it's not 15c. And if you did not know that, 61 over 4 is 15.25, which is 15c and a quarter. Question 19. In triangle XYZ, angle Z is the right angle. So let's draw a triangle. This is Z, a right angle. Length of YZ is 24. I'm going to call this Y, 24. All right, if tan of X, so X has to be here, that's 12 over 35. Okay, so then 12 over 35 must equal 24 over the adjacent side, or XZ. So then that means that XZ should be 35 times 2, or 70. What is the perimeter? Okay, so we need to do the sum of all three sides. So you have the height, we now have the base is 70, and we need to figure out the third side of the right triangle. So you're probably thinking c squared plus a squared plus b squared, and you'd be correct. So on the calculator, whoops, there we go. Can we have the calculator real quick? Clear, clear, clear. So we know that c is equal to the square root of 24 squared plus 70 squared, which is 74. And so then perimeter is going to equal 74 plus 70 plus 24, which is 168. The answer is B. Question 20. All right, we got you making it. All right, almost to the end. With this equation of a circle, what is the length of the circle radius? Okay, so what we want to do is complete this square for the circle, and that way we can get the radius squared. So first thing, you want to group the terms together. So x squared plus 14x plus y squared plus minus 6y is equal to 109. All right, so what we do is we take half of the middle terms. So let's go through it. So it's going to be x plus half of 14, which is 7 squared. And then y plus half of -6, which is -3 squared, is equal to 109 plus 7 squared plus 3 squared. Again, you're squaring it, so you don't need to worry about the negative. When we add all these together, we get 167. Now, again, they like to trap you on that. That is r squared for the equation circle. So you need to square root both sides to get the correct answer. So, hope that made more sense. And we got 2 more to go. Question 21. The speed of the vehicle is increasing at a rate of 7.3 meters per second squared. That squared is probably going to be a problem. What is the rate in miles per minute squared? Round to the nearest 10th. Use 1 mile is equal to 1,609 meters. All right, so let's go through it. 7.3 meters per second squared. So the first thing we do is convert to meters from miles. So 1 mile is going to be 1,609 meters. Now, how do we convert seconds? They didn't tell us. Well, we should know that there are 60 seconds in 1 minute, but because we want to square the units, we square the conversion. And so once you do that, you get the correct answer of B, which is 16.3. All right, congrats. You made it to the end of Math Module 2. Let's get question 22 done. So we have a system of equation, y equals -2.5 and y equals x squared plus 8x plus k. In the given system equation, k is a positive integer constant. The system has no real solution. So what are we supposed to do with that? Well, whenever we have a system of quadratic equations with no real solutions, we want to be thinking of the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. And then because there's no real solutions, we want to be less than 0. So let's set it up. First off, we're going to substitute -2.5 in for y. Set equal to 0. And now we do the discriminant. So b squared is 8 squared minus 4 times 1 and times all of the constant terms. So that's going to be both the k and the 2.5. And we set that less than 0. All right, from here we can solve it and we get k plus 2.5 is less than 16, or sorry, greater than 16. And then when we subtract the 2.5, we get k is greater than 13.5. Again, you might type in 13.6, but it said it had to be an integer. So that's why the answer was 14. And we wanted the smallest integer. That's why I couldn't be 15, 16, 17, or even 100. So that does it for me today. So I hope you found this helpful. Definitely, if you have any other questions, feel free to talk to your teacher and we'll help you out further. All right, take care.